Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz. Jeff Bennett is away. On the NewsHour tonight, Hurricane Beryl reaches Jamaica, continuing its deadly path of destruction through the Caribbean. The fallout from President Biden's debate performance continues as calls for him to step aside from inside the Democratic Party grow louder. And we preview the United Kingdom's general election, one day before voters head to the polls.
Something has to be done because it's close to breaking point, I think, for the majority of people in this country.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
Consumer Cellular. This is Sam. How may I help you? This is a pocket dial. Well, somebody's pocket.
Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular,
You get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing.
have a nice day.
A successful business owner sells his company and restores his father's historic jazz club with his son. A Raymond James financial advisor gets to know you, your passions, and the way you bring people together. Life well planned.
the Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation, upholding freedom by strengthening democracies at home and abroad. The Walton Family Foundation, working for solutions to protect water during climate change so people and nature can thrive together. Supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. Residents of Jamaica hunkered down today as heavy rains and punishing winds from Hurricane Beryl pounded the island. Power was out across much of the capital, Kingston. The center of the Category 4 storm passed just south of Jamaica this afternoon. At least 6 deaths have been attributed to Beryl since it began its march through the Caribbean earlier this week. New images reveal the extent of the devastation brought by the record-breaking Hurricane Beryl after the storm slammed into islands across the southeast Caribbean on Monday with heavy rain and ferocious winds.
It's hard to think about it. It's hard to see it. And I don't even want my enemies to go through such a devastation. It's really tough.
Communities left with no water or power, boats tossed onto the shore, and entire neighborhoods reduced to mangled heaps of metal.
This is actually the strongest storm that we've had come through St. Vincent in my lifetime.
Marlon Gibson lives in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which took a direct hit.
You're really just hoping for the best. And all around me, there were houses in the village. Their roofs were flying past. You could see it passing. It was just a terrifying experience.
Nearly all of the residents of one of St. Vincent's small islands were left homeless. With nowhere to go, many are now making their way to the capital, Kingstown. Sharon DeRoche is among them. She rode out Beryl in her bathroom.
The whole thing opened up, and it was a hard 4 hours battling.
And in Grenada, the Prime Minister said communications were down and almost nothing was left standing on the island of Catacu. Satellite images showed a grim before and after from above.
To see this level of destruction, it is almost Armageddon-like, almost total damage or destruction of all buildings, whether they be public buildings, homes, or other private facilities.
Relief efforts by the United Nations, local governments, and nonprofit groups are now underway across the region. Once Beryl passes by Jamaica, the hurricane is set to head next toward the Cayman Islands. It's forecast to reach Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula on Friday morning, and its remnants will likely reach southern Texas by Monday. Seen here from space, Beryl's winds peaked at 165 miles an hour earlier this week, making it the earliest Category 5 storm in recorded history and the strongest July hurricane ever. Its massive size fueled partly by climate change. Michael Lowry is a meteorologist and hurricane specialist for WPLG-TV in Miami.
There's no doubt that the warmer waters are due primarily because of the warming climate, and we are seeing the effects of that in stronger hurricanes. Hurricane Beryl moved over the warmest waters that we've ever recorded in the Atlantic, going back 40 plus years.
This unprecedented storm, Lowry says, is kicking off what's expected to be one of the most active hurricane seasons on record.
The water temperatures going from 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit could mean a 5-fold increase in devastating flooding rainfall on top of the greater potential for these storms to more rapidly intensify.
And as countries in the storm's wake reckon with Beryl's aftermath, weary residents are preparing for a long hurricane season ahead.
Back in this country, much of the U.S. will be facing extreme heat over the 4th of July weekend, with heat indexes reaching into the triple digits. We're going to look at that and new rules to protect workers from heat later in the program. In the day's other headlines, Israel's military says it killed a senior Hezbollah commander in southern Lebanon today. The commander was identified as Mohammed Nammeh Nasser, who went by the name Abu Nammeh. The IDF says he led a unit responsible for shooting rockets into Israel. Cross-border fire between the two sides has ramped up recently, sparking a global diplomatic effort to prevent all-out war. In Israel today, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant told a group of soldiers that he's prepared for any possibility.
We are striking Hezbollah very hard every day, and we will also reach a state of full readiness to take any action required in Lebanon, or to reach an arrangement from a position of strength. We prefer an arrangement, but if reality forces us, we will know how to fight.
In the meantime, a settlement tracking group says that Israel has approved the largest seizure of West Bank land in 3 decades. The group, called Peace Now, says the territory in the West Bank amounts to nearly 5 square miles. The current Israeli government considers expansion in the West Bank as legal and legitimate after Israel captured that territory in the 1967 war. Many Palestinians see these expansions as a barrier to any lasting peace. Much of the international community has deemed settlement expansion a violation of international law. Here at home, voters in 2 more states are closer to having abortion measures on the ballot this November. In Arizona, abortion rights advocates say they have more than double the required signatures for a measure that would enshrine abortion rights in the state's constitution. And in Nebraska, activists on both sides of the issue say they've submitted enough signatures for dueling measures, one to protect abortion rights and one to preserve the state's current 12-week ban. 3 other states are trying to add abortion measures to November ballots, while constitutional amendments to enshrine abortion rights are already on the ballot in 6 other states this fall. A U.S. judge has temporarily blocked the Biden administration from enforcing a rule against discrimination in health care on the basis of gender identity. The measure was finalized in May and was due to take effect on Friday. But 15 Republican-led states sued, saying it would require their Medicaid programs to pay for treatments and surgeries for transgender people. Tennessee's Attorney General applauded the block, saying that the law is, quote, an attempt to illegally force every healthcare provider in America to adopt the most extreme version of gender ideology. The defense has rested in the bribery and corruption trial of Senator Bob Menendez. His lawyers called several witnesses over 2 days, though the New Jersey Democrat himself did not testify. Menendez has pleaded not guilty to charges that he accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars in gold, cash, and gifts in exchange for favors he provided to 3 New Jersey businessmen. Menendez has resisted calls to resign from the Senate. Last month, he filed papers to run for re-election as an independent. The leaders of Russia and China have met for the 2nd time in as many months as Moscow seeks international support for its war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping sat down in Kazakhstan during a meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. That follows a trip by Mr. Putin to Beijing in May. A Kremlin spokesperson said the 2 leaders discussed Ukraine. They agreed that any peace talks without Russia's presence would go nowhere, and they pledged mutual support for one another.
Russian-Chinese relations of comprehensive partnership and strategic interaction are experiencing the best period in their history. Our cooperation is not directed against anyone. We do not create any blocs or alliances. We simply act in the interests of our peoples.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the smoke from Russian missile attacks filled the skies over the eastern city of Dnipro. Officials there say the strikes killed at least 5 civilians and injured 47 others. And Wall Street headed into the July 4th holiday on mixed footing. The Dow Jones Industrial Average ended the day just a fraction lower, but the Nasdaq climbed to yet another record close, adding nearly 160 points. The S&P 500 also closed at a new record. Meanwhile, like father, like son, NBA superstar LeBron James has reportedly agreed to a 2-year, $104 million contract extension with the Los Angeles Lakers, meaning he'll almost certainly get to play with his son, Bronny, who was drafted by the Lakers last week. No father and son duo has ever shared the court in an NBA game. For the elder James, next year will be his 22nd season in the league, tying a record for the most ever. Still to come on the NewsHour, the government releases new rules protecting workers from extreme heat. Why a decades-old lawsuit brought by Gary, Indiana against firearm manufacturers may soon be over. And a look at the heroic work of Ukraine's railroad workers since Russia's invasion.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
In the days following President Joe Biden's poor performance on the debate stage, Democrats have pondered how to approach the future of his re-election campaign. Congressman Lloyd Doggett of Texas was the first sitting Democratic lawmaker to call on Biden to drop out of the presidential race. He joins me now. Congressman, welcome and thanks for joining us. I'm sure you have seen these reports, too, of a number of your Democratic colleagues circulating a letter that they are proposing sending to the president, asking him to step aside as the nominee. You have said you're not involved in those efforts, but I wonder if you can just give us some insight here. How many of your Democratic colleagues share your concerns?
I think it's widespread. And my colleague from Arizona, Raul Grijalva, one of the senior members, a ranking member, was a chairman of the committee. He just came out publicly this afternoon. I think that there are many colleagues out there who realize what a severe, grave threat we face if Donald Trump, a criminal, and his gang can take over our government in January. We may never get it back. And all those things, climate, you were talking about earlier with the hurricane, needing to address the climate crisis, protect our public schools, ensure reproductive freedom, all of the issues we care about at home and abroad are going to be threatened by Donald Trump. We have to put forward our strongest candidate. And after the debate, after a year of lagging in the polls, today a New York Times poll out that they're 6 points apart. There's some of us just seeing we have to do something to save our republic, and we're not confident that Joe Biden can provide the answer as much as we admire his contribution and accomplishments.
Congressman, when you say those concerns are widespread, how many of your fellow lawmakers are you talking about here, and why aren't more saying so publicly like you are?
Well, I can't give you a number. I can tell you that not every one of my colleagues is situated as I am, as a member who's not endangered and who's not beginning his career, as you can tell by looking at me. I recognize that some people are very concerned about what the effect will be on them of coming out in opposition as it will be interpreted. Though we don't oppose the president, we simply ask him to make the very important decision of stepping aside and enabling us to defeat Trump. But they're concerned about that. And so, yes, there have been rumblings, as you heard yesterday in Maine, in Washington state, opposite ends of the country. 2 of our Democratic colleagues said they expected Donald Trump to be the next president. In the middle, there are several that have expressed their concern about what's happening and the performance in the debate. So I think there's a great undercurrent, many questions that need to be asked. What we need is the president out there, if all is well with him, engaging with journalists like you here on the NewsHour and in other forum and town halls, answering the tough questions, demonstrating that that Thursday night debate is not the consistent problem he has, but it was an aberration. I hope it was.
Well, Congressman, for the record, I should say we would welcome a chance to sit down and speak directly to the president. But you know as well as I do that the president has now said repeatedly he is not dropping out. He's made that clear to his campaign staff, to funders he's spoken to. We know he's meeting with Democratic governors tonight. He's giving a network interview on Friday. He's campaigning over the weekend. Is there anything that you think the president could say or do right now that would change your mind?
Well, first, let me say, I think there are things that could happen that could change his mind. I still believe that he puts country ahead of self, unlike Donald Trump, and that as these numbers come in and as he hears from more members, he may well make the decision that this is not the race that he should be making, and that he doesn't want a legacy that is so impressive in the Senate and as our president to end with the transfer of power to a tyrant. As far as my mind is concerned, I've never been in doubt that I would be actively supporting the nominee of our party and that might well be President Biden. I just think it's a little heavier lift than if we had a new candidate who could appeal to the double haters, as they're called, and to the many people out there who've been saying in the polls they're unwilling to support President Biden and they don't believe that he's the person who can do the job over the next 4 years.
Congressman, other Democratic lawmakers I've spoken to express a lot of concern about there not being very much time left in this election cycle. They also say if President Biden were to drop out, another candidate would now have to make him or herself known to the rest of the country. There's not a lot of time for that. And I should point out, in the latest CNN poll, it's Vice President Harris who's the only one who comes within the margin of error in terms of a hypothetical matchup with Donald Trump. With other high-profile governors in comparison there, Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg in the cabinet, and also Gretchen Whitmer. Do you think she should be the nominee if you're asking President Biden to step aside?
I'm not selecting a nominee at this point or speaking for any candidate. She's certainly a talented person who should be in the mix. Time is short, but I think we have time for a fair, open, democratic process where any of the individuals you just mentioned, several other governors, perhaps members of the Senate or the cabinet, could present themselves to the American people. I think their numbers will immediately go up as they become identified outside of their states, and that having someone new, someone a little more youthful in this race could give us the edge to defeat Donald Trump, an edge we may not enjoy if the numbers stay as they are. I just ask that the president and his circle of close friends and family look at the numbers and determine how are we going to prevail in November if things continue as they have over the last year and as they have worsened in recent days as a result of the debate.
In the few seconds we have left, do you believe that that window is closing if President Biden were to make that kind of decision?
I think that it's a decision that needs to be made in just the next few days. Every day counts. Time is of the essence. We don't have that much time before Chicago. I'll be there for him or for whoever might be our nominee, but let's put forward our best case, our best opportunity to save our country from what would happen under a Trump regime.
That is Democratic Congressman Lloyd Doggett of Texas joining us tonight. Congressman, thank you. Good to speak with you.
Thank you, Amna.
Britain goes to the polls tomorrow for an election in which the center-left opposition Labour Party, led by Sir Keir Starmer, is expected to claim victory. The Conservatives, who've governed since 2010, fear a landslide victory for Labour could force them out of power for a generation. Special correspondent Malcolm Brabant reports from Britain's south coast.
For decades, West Worthing has been a true blue Conservative fortress. But if the changing political tide turns this district red, it'll signal that the Labour Party is riding to a landslide victory across the country on a wave of quiet desperation.
Something has to be done because it's close to breaking point, I think, for the majority of people in this country.
Like millions of voters, this former soldier and paramedic feels poorer after 14 years under the Conservatives. Steve, who declined to give his surname, trusts Labour's promises to raise living standards.
What sort of life is it when you feel that you're literally surviving? You're not living a life. You're surviving from one month to the next. And people are fed up with it. They want some change.
Labour's candidate here is Becky Cooper, a public health doctor who's passionate about one of the party's main pledges, to heal the ailing National Health Service.
At the moment in hospitals, we are seeing, 18-month waiting times for things that are actually starting to kill people, which is terrible. So I liken it to getting a patient off life support. That's what we need to do first of all.
Cooper says investing in preventive medicine will ultimately pay dividends.
The cost benefit always shows you put money into prevention, you end up saving a lot of money in treatment.
Knighted for his public service record, Conservative candidate Peter Bottomley, Britain's longest-serving lawmaker, is struggling because his party crashed the economy 2 years ago following a series of government scandals during the pandemic.
We're not top of the pops, but we're here for a purpose, and I'm here to get re-elected if I can.
Like other Conservatives, Bottomley fears a Labour supermajority in Parliament.
I think that you'll get very quickly buyer's regret, voters' remorse, and they'll say, why didn't anyone tell us? Well, I won't say I told you so, but I will say it now. Think before you vote.
Trainee police officer Roland Menser is seeking integrity and hasn't found it.
There's so many sleaze and lies and everything that goes on in this current government, which it's unacceptable.
But he's not impressed with the Labour leader either.
You have to say things that you don't even believe in. So that's what Keir Starmer is doing right now. Things that he believes in, he's not saying it because he has to say things that are going to win him the election.
In an election commercial, Keir Starmer polishes his man-of-the-people image with a Labour-supporting former soccer star.
How are you? Good, how are you? Are we good?
Labour isn't known for wealth creation, but Starmer says his priority is economic growth.
I want in 5 or 10 years this to be a better country. Living standards are better. People feel their schools are better, their hospitals are better. They've got a better chance in life.
Starmer's opponent, Rishi Sunak, Britain's first Prime Minister of colour, portrays himself as a dependable leader for dangerous times. Under Sunak, a rich former banker, inflation has come down, but he's been waterboarded by the financial mess he inherited and accusations that he's out of touch with ordinary people.
We've faced unprecedented challenges here at home because of global insecurity. But by sticking with the plan, Rishi Sunak is steadying the ship and making progress.
You can have tax cuts with the Conservatives, or you can have thousands of pounds of tax rises under the Labour Party, because he's simply not being straight with you about what is coming. Mark my words, your taxes are going up if he is in charge.
Although the Labour leader has purged his party of some hardcore left-wingers, Conservatives fear that Starmer is not the moderate centrist he claims to be.
I would say I'm steely, other people say ruthless. I'm absolutely determined to get to where we need to get to. And whatever decisions are needed to get there, I will take.
Unless the opinion polls are completely wrong, Britain is about to take a step left at a time when much of Europe is turning hard right. The only uncertainty is just how big Labour's majority is going to be in Parliament to push through its legislative programme.
I think there's precious little signs of hope in the country at the moment. There's a pervasive sense that Britain is broken and a pervasive lack of faith in politics to fix that.
Political scientist Anand Menon.
Whilst people want a change of government, whilst people are fed up with the Conservatives, I'm not picking up any real sense of faith that Labour will be able to address the problems the country faces.
Jaywick on the east coast is one of Britain's most deprived areas. Decent, affordable housing is scarce here and elsewhere. Charity worker Sarah Cox supports Labour's plans to build cheap homes. After buying her first property, the economy tanked and her mortgage payments shot up.
I have a really good job, a management level job, and I can't afford to go to Starbucks and get a coffee because it's too expensive. Because food shopping and the electric bill and the mortgage have taken all my money. It needs to change. It doesn't need to change under Nigel Farage, though. It needs to change under Labour.
Jaywick belongs to the district being contested by Nigel Farage, the catalyst for Britain's exit from the European Union and Donald Trump's most prominent ally here. Farage's anti-immigration reform party could help to boost Labour's majority by attracting support from disaffected voters who'd normally back the Conservatives.
You know, nothing works anymore, does it? Nothing works. The health service, travelling anywhere, trying to get your kids or grandkids to get a house.
Farage believes the Labour Party will implode after 5 years in power and hopes that Britain's divided right will unite behind him at the next election. Are you destroying the Conservative Party?
No, they've destroyed themselves. They've literally betrayed the wishes of Brexit voters. It was about getting back control of our country, getting back control of our borders, and they've given us record levels of immigration. We are literally living through a population explosion on these islands, and that's devalued the quality of life of everybody apart from the richest.
Leading Conservatives hope potential reform voters will reject Farage, attacking him as an apologist for Vladimir Putin after he claimed that the West's eastward expansion provoked Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
I stood up 10 years ago in the European Parliament and said, let's stop poking the Russian bear with a stick. And I said there'd be a war if we carried on the current course. And they're only screaming and shouting at me because I was right.
Farage's candidate in West Worthing is former tax official Edmund Rook. It's Rook's first foray into the politics of Britain and Vladimir Putin.
We have given him cause, or a pretext rather, to invade Ukraine by the fact that we've surrounded his country with NATO countries like Poland, Estonia, etc., etc.
Thank you for switching.
In West Worthing, Peter Bottomley might be saved by wavering Conservative voters who believe Farage is boosting Russia's cause.
I'm not going to start discussing Nigel Farage's views on international affairs, but I wouldn't want to have him marrying my daughter or taking my mother out to lunch.
Across the market square, Becky Cooper says she wants to restore trust in politics.
I think it's become a bit too circus-like. It's become a bit too much about sort of the awful things that some people right at the top of politics are doing. We need to get rid of that, cut out the rot.
In what some commentators regard as a desperate attempt at a Hail Mary pass, the Conservatives wheeled out former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, removed from office because of numerous scandals. Johnson warned against what he calls Starmageddon.
Whacking up taxes on pensions, on property, persecuting private enterprise, attacking private education and private healthcare, with all the pointless extra burden that will place on the taxpayer. And all the time, poor old Starmer is so terrified of disobeying left-wing dogma that he's reluctant to explain the difference between a man and a woman, and he just sits there with his mouth opening and shutting like a stunned mullet.
We've got plenty to say, because this campaign is about change, it's about turning the page and rebuilding our country.
Keir Starmer may not be a showman, but the polls suggest that Britain wants the change that he's offering, although for many, voting Labour will be a leap in the dark. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Malcolm Brabant in London.
More than 90 million Americans are under heat advisories this week. In the West, where a record-breaking heat wave is expected to be long-lasting, firefighters are working to extinguish several major wildfires, forcing thousands of Californians to evacuate. All of this comes as President Biden unveiled long-awaited regulations designed to protect workers from excessive heat. Stephanie Tsai has more. Stephanie?
Now, many people may not realize it, but heat is the leading cause of weather-related death in the U.S. As many brace for triple digits in the days ahead, protection from extreme heat is top of mind for many. Haley Smith is an environmental reporter with the Los Angeles Times and has been covering all this closely. Haley, it's good to see you. You know, it seems every July more heat records are shattered, and yet I've seen a lot of superlative language around what's facing Central and Northern California this week. Why is this heat wave so concerning?
Hi, I think it's for two reasons. One is that this is not only a severe heat event, but it's also a prolonged event. We've got excessive heat warnings in effect basically from the far northern counties of California all the way down to the Mexican border. Portions of the Coachella Valley are going up to 120 degrees, the Sacramento area and the Central Valley up to 115 degrees, even 110 here in some parts of Los Angeles. And these temperatures really aren't supposed to let up until at least next week, so there's just no chance for people to find any relief.
Yeah, even at night, I understand. A statement from the National Weather Service's Bay Area office stood out to me because it says the scale, magnitude, and longevity of this heat wave will likely rival anything they've seen in the last 18 years. Talk about what the major impacts may be, including wildfire risks.
Absolutely. So with rising temperatures like this, we see increased risk of wildfires, and that's because the hotter temperatures really dry out the state's landscape and vegetation and just prime it to burn. So as you said, we've already seen at least half a dozen wildfires popping up around the state this week. One that we're watching really closely is the Thompson fire in Oroville, Butte County, which has already burned some structures, injured firefighters, and prompted thousands of mandatory evacuations. But the other risk of heat, as you referenced at the beginning, is that it is so dangerous. It is, in fact, responsible for more deaths in the United States than hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods combined over the last 30 years. So there's just something so insidious about extreme heat, and not a lot of people are totally aware yet of how dangerous it can be.
Absolutely. And a heat wave in 2022 in California was blamed for hundreds of excess deaths, some 395. It's been assumed that many of those deaths were heat related. Are officials better prepared this year?
Yes and no. I think that officials, in terms of lawmakers, policymakers, emergency responders, are getting better at being aware of the dangers of extreme heat and trying to communicate them to the public. Here in Los Angeles, for example, we've seen the city activating some cooling centers where people can just go get some water and some shade and take a break from the heat. There's also been a lot of information campaigns launched in recent years trying to educate people about the dangers. But as you mentioned, that 2022 heat wave killed almost 400 Californians. There was another heat wave in Phoenix last year where it lasted for 31 days and killed about 645 people. So the dangers are still very much there.
Let's talk about these new workplace rules that the Biden administration has proposed to protect workers from heat-related risks. What are they? And are they like regulations that California has had in place for years already?
Yeah, this is such big news. OSHA this week has moved forward a proposed rule that would establish indoor and outdoor workplace heat standards for millions of workers, some 35 million workers in workplaces like kitchens and farms and warehouses where temperatures regularly soar to 80 degrees or hotter. And so what these regulations would do would be triggering things like employers needing to provide water and rest breaks. And at 90 degrees, some of those things would become mandatory rest breaks and water breaks, things like that. And yes, to answer your question, this does mimic some moves that we've made here in California. We became the first state in 2006 to establish heat standards for outdoor workers. And just last month, we passed standards for indoor workers. And it's also important to note that these proposed OSHA regulations would also apply to states that have kind of done the opposite, like Florida and Texas, where they've actually passed laws recently to prevent employers or cities from establishing worker protections. So these federal rules, if they were approved, would supersede that and hopefully help save some lives.
So according to the EPA, there are an average of about 34 deaths a year attributable to heat on the job. Construction workers bear the most risk, but that still doesn't account for thousands of other heat-related deaths every year nationwide. What else are officials doing to reduce heat-related fatalities?
Yeah, you're right. It's presumed that a lot of these heat death numbers are undercounted. We know that they're chronically undercounted. Here in California, we are working on establishing a heat wave ranking system that would actually rank heat waves similar to what is done for hurricanes, so like a Category 5 heat wave, for example. The state is also working to improve its efforts to surveil and track heat-related illnesses and deaths. And then at the federal level, there's actually been a huge push in recent weeks to get FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to broaden its definition of a major disaster to include extreme heat, which advocates say would open up new avenues of funding for cities and states that are trying to deal with this worsening issue.
That is Haley Smith, an environmental reporter with the Los Angeles Times. Haley, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
"30 years ago, Gary, Indiana was declared the murder capital of the U.S. Following the example of other cities, Gary sued gun makers and sellers for their part in fueling the city's violence. As Jeffrey Brown reports, Gary's case is now the last one still active as this industrial city works to get a handle on gun violence.
At Daniel Hale Williams Elementary in Gary, Indiana, graduating fifth graders were receiving end-of-the-year awards. Amid the celebration, the ceremony's guest speaker offered a warning of sorts, one with echoes of her own experience growing up here.
Being excited for middle school is a very important thing. But a couple of things happen as you get older. You change, you meet new people.
By the time Aaliyah Stewart was the age of these kids, she had already experienced the horrific toll of gun violence.
With Anthony, I was 7 and my brother was like our world. His smile would light up an entire room. And a fight broke out, and the story goes that he got out to break up the fight and was shot in the head. So gun violence is something that you really don't pay attention to until it becomes like a reality at your door.
And then it happened again.
Yes, almost 7 years later, my brother James was killed. James was 20 and I was 13.
In this community, it was more easy to get a gun than maybe a fresh tomato.
Brian Evans is deputy chief of the Gary Police Department. He joined the force in 1994, the same year the media declared the city murder capital of the U.S., with a homicide rate almost 9 times the national level.
I've had days back then where we've had as many as 5 homicides in one day, most of it fueled by drug and then gangs for drug territory.
The explosion of violence came after a long decline for Gary. Founded as a company town at the turn of the last century, U.S. Steel's Gary Works employed about 30,000 people at its peak. While it's still one of the largest steel mills in the U.S., today it employs some 4,000. That decline, accompanied by white flight, cut Gary's population by more than half, leaving an estimated 10,000 abandoned structures. And a much less racially diverse community, today more than 80% black. And more than a third of Gary's residents live below the poverty line.
Those jobs dried up and went away, leaving a big economic void here in the city that couldn't be filled as fast as they left. And so we were affected by that, which ultimately affects everything.
Including the crime rise.
Absolutely, absolutely.
While Gary struggled to police its way out of gun violence, the city also tried another approach, one with national implications. In 1999, Gary and other cities decided to pursue a sweeping new legal strategy to sue gun sellers and manufacturers for not preventing illegal sales. Well, nearly 25 years later, that suit has yet to play out fully in court, and now it appears it may never.
House Bill 1235 is the continuation of a long-running effort to remove sort of the last final lawsuit against gun manufacturers that has been pending.
This past March, the Republican-led Indiana legislature passed and Republican Governor Eric Holcomb signed a bill that limited who can bring legal action against the gun industry. Now only the state, not municipalities like Gary, can sue. And the law was made retroactive to exactly 3 days before Gary filed its 1999 lawsuit.
It's insulting, to say the least, that this legislative body would make a determination about a lawsuit when that is the role of the judicial branch in the state of Indiana.
Democrat Reagan Hatcher represents Gary in the Indiana General Assembly. You are a legislator. One of the arguments, of course, is that the legislature in a democracy is where these public issues should be addressed, rather than the courts.
I don't disagree with that, and I think that is what the legislature is for. However, I disagree with the fact that it was made retroactive and it was a law that was specific to one lawsuit.
Is there a racial dynamic at play?
I don't know what else could be in play right now except for a racial dynamic, a targeting of Northwest Indiana a targeting of the people who have made a determination that this is a lawsuit that is important to this community. Most of our Republican representatives are in rural areas, and so when we talk about inner city crime, it's hard for them to understand the impact of that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House.
Republican Representative Chris Jeter, who authored the bill to kill the lawsuit, didn't respond to an interview request. But Lawrence Keene, who represents the National Shooting Sports Foundation, the trade association for the firearm industry, told us Gary's lawsuit unfairly targets legal gun sales.
Gary's case is the last of some 40 lawsuits filed beginning in the late 1998, 1999 timeframe, seeking to blame the industry for the criminal misuse of lawfully sold firearms. It has no merit.
Keene points out that nearly 30 states have laws similar to the one Indiana just passed, shielding the gun industry. And that in 2005, President George W. Bush signed a law giving the gun industry broad legal protection from lawsuits.
In essence, that means that the firearms industry is shielded from being held responsible in courts in ways that other industries are not.
Well, I disagree with the premise of your question. The difference is no other industry had been attacked with lawsuits like the firearms industry, and that's why legislation was necessary to stop these frivolous lawsuits. No other industry is held responsible for the actions of criminals. No one would think to sue Budweiser for drunk driving accidents.
I would say this is more akin to the opioid issues.
Rodney Pohl is the city attorney for Gary.
If a doctor prescribes opioids to somebody that they know needs opioids, totally legal. But if you have a doctor that's overprescribing and you have companies that are pushing doctors to overprescribe or prescribe to individuals that may not necessarily need it, now all of a sudden you have an opioid epidemic where people are addicted to them.
While these arguments go on, gun violence persists, even as the number of homicides has fallen more than 50% since the mid-90s.
This is the operations center where we can view multiple cameras all over the city.
Deputy Police Chief Brian Evans points to new surveillance efforts like this real-time crime center and better coordination with other law enforcement. But also making his job harder, in 2022, the state ended a requirement that people in Indiana obtain a permit to carry, conceal, or transport a handgun.
Before, we could legally ask if you had a gun permit, if you were legally able to have the gun. Not now. We don't have that right. Matter of fact, we don't even have a right to encounter you just because of the gun.
The steel mill's directly back that way.
As for Aaliyah Stewart, she's focused on the continuing realities for many in Gary.
My brother and his friends, this was the meetup spot.
Now 23, she's channeled the grief from the deaths of her two brothers into a nonprofit focused on empowering young people and preventing gun violence.
How prevalent are guns in the life of the young people you're working with?
If I put 10 kids in here and said, how many of you have had a loved one killed to gun violence, 9 of them are gonna raise their hand.
9 out of 10.
9 out of 10. It's their reality. It's their truth. I try to be that beacon of light, beacon of hope, providing an opportunity, a space to be theirself, somewhere to come where they have someone that looks like them, acts like them, and understands where they come from.
While efforts like Aaliyah's go on, so does the city's lawsuit, at least for now. Both sides will be back in court later this month, arguing whether the state's new law will in fact end Gary's nearly 25-year-old case. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Jeffrey Brown in Gary, Indiana.
When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Ukrainians desperately tried to board trains to leave the country. Since then, the Ukrainian railroad has played a crucial role in evacuating people from frontline cities, transporting world leaders, moving cargo and Ukrainian troops. NewsHour special correspondent Volodymyr Solub and videographer Pavel Sukuldolsky have this report.
The early days of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine brought chaos to the nation's largest company, Ukrainian Railways. With millions of people trying to flee, the train system was operating at peak capacity. The company had to change schedules daily to shuttle thousands of people across the border.
Ukrainian railways have become a lifeline for the country from day one of Russia's full-scale invasion. They were carrying people out of the country to safety and carrying in so much needed aid and supplies.
Ukrainian railways became the safest way for the world leaders to travel to Ukraine. Heads of states, prime ministers and presidents, including President Biden, they all took an overnight train from Poland to get to Kyiv. Recognizing the vital importance of the rail system during the war, last fall, President Zelensky awarded rail workers for their commitment and bravery, thanking them for their contributions.
I want to thank all of you and all workers of our railways. These are 220,000 people who, despite all the dangers, are working to make sure that our country keeps running.
The Ukrainian train system was also under Russian attack. Their cars pierced with shrapnel, their railways blown away by explosions, and their employees killed or wounded. And it was a rail station that was the site of one of the war's most heinous Russian attacks in Kramatorsk. Dozens killed by a cluster bomb that hit a crowded platform. According to Ukrainian Railways, as of April of this year, almost 30 of its employees were killed and more than 90 were injured in line of duty, with more than 1,700 wounded on the battlefield. 22-year-old Andriy Sobkovsky got his first job at 18 working for Ukrainian Railways as a train conductor. But 10 months into his first-time job, he was conscripted, and in April of 2022, 3 rockets hit the base where he was stationed.
I was stuck under a concrete plank. I was sleeping on my bed when it happened, and this plate broke in half and fell on my legs. A guy to my right died immediately. He was simply crushed by debris. A guy to my left was also conscious all the time, and I tried to help him.
Andriy had to wait for 12 hours before he was rescued. With part of the ceiling crushing his legs, his thoughts were of his close ones and his future.
I was thinking about my family, about losing my legs. I realized it back then, because even if your limb is crushed by something for 2 hours, then that's it. I knew right away that I will lose both my legs.
His rehabilitation is still ongoing, 2 years after he lost his limbs. He now has a special car to help him get around, but the biggest help comes from his family, even though at first they were all very shaken.
It was very difficult. It turned out that it wasn't my family supporting me, but I had to support my family. It was the most difficult for my grandfather. He's 70 years old, a former soldier himself. He took my injury very bad. We were very close. I spent most of my childhood with him.
It is for the people like Andriy that the Global Ukraine Rail Task Force raises money. Earlier this year, a delegation of railroad companies' representatives from different countries came to Ukraine, and they came bearing gifts.
Well, we've come to show our solidarity with the Ukrainian rail system in this war of aggression that was started by Russia. We primarily come to give the Ukrainian trade union, the railway trade union, a donation check for food packages and drinking water.
Nick Brooks co-chairs Global Ukraine Rail Task Force, which is an initiative of the rail industry from Europe and North America to support Ukrainian rail companies because of the Russian invasion.
It is essentially Ukrainian Railways, we think, is the second army of Ukraine. It is the backbone of the country, backbone of society, backbone of the economy.
The support from the European and American colleagues is clearly appreciated by Ukrainian Railways leadership.
Well, psychologically, it's a very huge sign for our employees that they have solidarity of the entire railway community. It's not, they feel they're already the largest community in Ukraine, but feeling being the part of the huge railway network and understanding that they're not alone, it's a very powerful message.
Ukrainian trains carry not only those presidents and prime ministers, but perhaps more precious cargo, the men and women wounded on the front lines and those returning home. And with the end of the Russian war against Ukraine nowhere near in sight, Ukrainian Railways will keep playing a vital role in supporting the country's survival. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Volodymyr Sologub in Kyiv, Ukraine.
Many of you will remember Flossie Lewis, who was among our earliest profiles in our Brief but Spectacular series. She spoke to us in 2016 about growing old and living well and earned millions of clicks and shares online. Well, tonight we hear from Flossie and from Brief but Spectacular series creator Steve Goldblum to celebrate a very special occasion, her 100th birthday.
I am Steve Goldblum. I'm the creator of Brief but Spectacular, and I'm here with one of the best guests we've ever had. It's Flossie Lewis, and you are approaching a very big birthday. You're going to be
100.
You're going to be 100 years old. We first met when you were 91, and we did a video together.
And I asked, what do you want me to do? And you said, just talk. Getting old is a state of mind. Now, I'm 91, I'm badly crippled, but I still think I'm 15. Accepting the fact that the body is going to go, but the personality doesn't have to go. And that thing which is the hardest to admit is that character doesn't have to go.
What does it feel like for you to watch that back and hear it?
It feels like I haven't changed much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a nice thing to feel, although I no longer see, as you know, and the hearing is bad, as you know. But we still talk as if we're old friends, and as if I were once your teacher.
Yeah.
And that's a lovely thing.
You know, I was looking at some old footage that we had
together.
together.
I love that.
But we were sitting there and talking about death.
How long would you like to live?
When the eyes and the ears go. No point after that. Yeah. I no longer can read. I mean, I'm looking at my fingers and I can see 10. But the pleasure of reading and making notes in the margin, that's gone. But that's part of my life. And I no longer write verse because even though I write it, I can't read it back. I can't perfect it. Let's put it this way. I do not want to die because I love too many people.
Your character has not gone anywhere. It's completely intact. And
I wish it were character, dear. It's personality. There's a difference. No, I get away with murder every day.
So what I want to do is I want to ask you a few questions, but I'd like to disappear and make it go behind the camera. Yes. I just want to say thank you, Flossie. It's great to have you back.
Thank you, Steve.
What has changed since the last time we spoke?
The body has grown old, really old. I haven't lost a lot of the energy, but I can't walk. And that really confines me. There's nothing to be done about it. I will be 100. And that's a very big thing. And there are moments when I'm very sharp. And then there are moments when I fall apart. And that happens because the memory, Steve, does go. And suddenly I find myself in the middle of a sentence, waiting for a word that I've known all my life, and it doesn't come. And that can wipe you out.
What do you derive the most pleasure from today?
Remembering the people that I loved. My name is Flossie Lewis, and this has been my brief but spectacular take.
And a very hearty happy birthday to Flossie from everyone here at the PBS NewsHour. Remember, there is a lot more online, including a story about a group of cacti species that's been poached to near extinction. That's at pbs.org/newshour. And join us again back here tomorrow night for a look back at a Supreme Court term full of consequential and controversial decisions. In the meantime, that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Amna Nawaz. On behalf of the entire NewsHour team, thank you for joining us.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Jim and Nancy Bildner, and the Robert and Virginia Schiller Foundation. The Ford Foundation, working with visionaries on the front lines of social change worldwide. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.